All right, welcome to Layton Bethel, everyone, and a special welcome to our video audience. My name is Sherwin. I just wanted to remind you that we have two services every Sunday, one at 9 and one at 11, and you are cordially invited to drop in on us. We have lots of room. Today, I am talking about adultery, which is always an interesting and controversial subject. A story I heard years ago was a rookie pastor who went to a seasoned pastor and asked, how can I tell if someone is cheating on their wife or their husband? And he said, it's real easy. Just announce that you're going to do a sermon on adultery and then pay attention to who doesn't show up. And I had particular fun with that in the first service already. I don't know if that's true or not, but, it's there. 40 years that I've been a pastor, I've pretty much seen it all. I've seen people have decades-long affairs, and they'll tell me, well, it's just a thing between friends. It's no big deal. I had in my first church a fellow that went into the nursing home. He had some dementia and a number of other things, and the nursing home director was a fundamentalist. She'd been raised some kind of conservative Baptist thing, and she was generally alarmed at the lack of morality in South Dakota. But what was so interesting is this old boy that got into the nursing home, he kind of visited the ladies, a different one every night. And they would catch him in bed with these gals, and she was just beside herself, really angry. And she called me. She says, you're his pastor, you should do something. Well, I was still wet behind the ears, so I did what any young pastor would do. I took it to my consistory. I said, what do you guys think we should do about this? And of course, it was all guys because it was South Dakota. And they said, one guy, he's retirement age at the time, he says, we're not doing anything. At that age, all they can do is get tired. And I thought, well, that's good. But now since then, the infidelity of senior citizens, I think, has gone up because, Viagra's been invented and there's just more opportunities. I've heard around here of swap meets where people actually get together for the purpose of exchanging spouses or partners. I've heard of hot tub parties. I've heard, of course, of affairs between co-workers. And, I've been trained beyond repair on how to do marriage counseling, and I've got a lot of experience at it. But usually if you're in a marriage counseling situation and one of the two people doesn't want to make progress, it's usually because there's a third party around. And then in recent years, I've been introduced to the concept of thruples. And I've seen at least twice in the last 2 years of 3 people living together. It's kind of like polygamy without a license. And it doesn't work really well. Usually they end up splitting up. All 3 of them leave each other. And then, of course, the other thing that I hear of occasionally is the open marriage, where people get together, they get married, but they don't promise each other fidelity. In fact, they promise infidelity. And I've seen some of those last 25 years, and some of them don't make it very long at all. Now today, if you have been cheated on, I acknowledge your hurt. It's an incredible hurt. It feels like a betrayal. And sometimes it can take years to get past it. When I was first introduced to marriage counseling at the seminary, I was told that at least half of all humans have affairs. And I always thought that was kind of high. I didn't know what to make of that. And this association of marriage and family therapy, which I belong to because I can. According to the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, national surveys indicate that 15% of married women and 25% of married men have had extramarital affairs. That seems to be much more accurate than the 50% thing. But yeah, I've had years of training in marriage counseling and years of actually doing the marriage counseling, and I can tell you that adultery is definitely a very real issue. And Jesus was quite severe in talking about it. I'm going through the Sermon on the Mount, which is Matthew 5 through 7, and this is what he says about adultery. And again, the Sermon on the Mount is kind of a summary of Jesus' teaching. But this is what he says about adultery. You have heard the commandment that says, you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, that sounds pretty severe, so some definitions are in order. First of all, I want to talk about attraction. And attraction is not sin. It is not lust. Okay? It is normal for you to be attracted to other human beings. That's not going to stop. Jesus adds this line, and this is the best translation I could find, but he talks about lust in your heart. You know, physical attraction, that happens below the heart. Lust in your heart is different. He's talking about getting emotional with it. He's talking about when you just see somebody and you decide you're going to try and bust up their marriage and yours so that you can be with that person. That's what he's talking about here. That is the lust in the heart. There's a big difference between attraction and stealing someone's spouse. You know, a while back, I was walking around Costco with my daughter. And, you know, I am amazed at how friendly people are in Granville. You know, especially guys aged 20 to 30. When I was walking with her, it was amazing. I thought, wow, these people are so friendly. And then I'd see these old guys looking at her, and I'd just stand there and go, you know, and kind of tap my side, just, you know, let them think that I was armed. And it was just kind of fun to do. But I'm grateful for the privilege of having attractive daughters, so I shouldn't complain about that. But that's not sinful. You're supposed to notice that. I mean, can you imagine if we weren't attracted to each other, the human race would die out with this generation because, you know, we wouldn't get together. So it's an important thing. It's a God-given instinct. I want to show you a picture of this guy. This is a 3,100-pound bull. He won the prize for being the biggest bull at the Iowa State Fair this year. And he looks a little sedated there, and he probably is, because there's 1,000 cows in that building that he's in. And I'm guessing that he wants every one of them to be his girlfriend for a while. So, he was very calm there, and he looked like one of the tamer bulls. He was definitely used to having people around him. But, you know, it's his job to be attracted to cows because we like hamburger. So we need that, you see. If he wasn't, we would starve to death. Well, you and I come out of the same factory as that bull. We are the same creator. And he made us to be attracted to each other. And that's a good thing. You don't have to be ashamed of that. Not at all. It's the same reason when you see a big, good hamburger and your mouth starts to water. It's a biological response, God-given. Don't despair of that. And don't shame people that you're attracted to by saying, oh, you shouldn't dress that way or so. No, you're supposed to be attracted. That's God's way of wiring you, and you can't change it. But here's where it gets dicey. If you feel sorry for yourself because you're not in a relationship with this particular person that you have eyes for, if you feel sorry for yourself because you're not with that one, if you feel sorry for yourself because who you have is not enough and you plot to get someone else's spouse, that's when you've crossed the line. That is lust in your heart. See, attraction, let me emphasize again, that happens below your heart. Lust happens in it. If you act on it, if you act on this lust, it will cause you a world of hurt. Attraction is harmless. But lust to possess, lust in your heart, that's where the line gets crossed. So that's the definition of attraction and lust. The definition of adultery is also something that needs to be clarified because the church has messed that up so much over the centuries. But adultery means to break a vow. If you commit to someone and break the vow, that is committing adultery. Single people cannot commit adultery with other single people because there's no vow being broken there. The New Testament calls that porneia, where we get the word pornography from. It's sexual immorality, they call it. But it's not adultery. There is a definite difference because they're not breaking a vow. Adultery is the violation of marriage vows. And Jesus uses really strong language with this. Here's what he says. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. Now don't do that right now. Okay? Jesus is speaking metaphorically here. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And I have to emphasize, it's obvious Jesus wasn't speaking literally here. Because if you cut your one hand off, you can still sin with your other hand. You know, when it comes to sin, we're ambidextrous. We can sin equally with both hands. But he's underlining an important truth. And the truth is, especially if you look at the syntax of the Greek text, he's saying that if you commit adultery, you're creating hell on earth. And he's very strict about that. The word he uses for hell here is Gehenna, which was the name of the garbage dump outside of Jerusalem. And everybody that heard him would have understood that place right there, which has a constant fire going and smells nasty in Jesus' day. And that's what he was talking about. You know, if you commit adultery, you create hell for yourself in this life. Break up a marriage and it creates hell for you and for any kids involved. So don't do it. Get rid of the things that might lead you into this. Now, I maintain that the biggest cause of all sin, and especially the biggest cause of adultery, is self-pity. Someone will feel sorry for themselves because their spouse is inadequate. And so they'll try to get somebody else. Now, you can cure that. The best cure for self-pity is gratitude. Being thankful to God for who he's given you. Now, and that usually cures the desire. Now, as a general rule, this works, but there are exceptions, of course. It doesn't always work. How do you deal with those who are guilty of adultery? You know, the church has got a terrible track record on that. When I was at ORU, James Dobson came in one time to do a chapel. You all know who he is, Focus on the Family guy. He's so conservative, he doesn't even spit when he brushes his teeth. You know, he's real right-winger. Well, anyway, he did a thing on this passage at ORU. And just try to imagine this line that says, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off, with 1,500 young men listening to that. And they're all trying to not laugh. But that's an example of how Christians have abused this, how we've used these things to cause shame. that shouldn't be considered shameful at all. But you see it all the time. You know, you see people throughout history who have taken this passage literally, people who have cut their own hands off and blinded themselves. And it's crazy. Now, you need the context of the Sermon on the Mount here. You know, chapters 5 through 7. This is in chapter 5, but as Jesus is wrapping this thing up, in the beginning of chapter 7, this is what he says. He says, don't condemn others, and God won't condemn you. God will be as hard on you as you are on others. He will treat you exactly as you treat them. Churches and other groups like to single out things about sex. If it's got to do with sex, we're going to make a big deal of it. We'll discipline you and humiliate you. I had an elder in Harrison who talked about how he came back from World War II, and there was a young gal there whose husband was killed in World War II. He was a mailman, and they started dating. She got pregnant. She went to a different church than one he was going to, but he had to go to that church, and he had to stand up in front of the congregation on a Sunday morning and confess to adultery, or they wouldn't let him get married. Now, first of all, he didn't commit adultery because neither one of them was married. She's a widow, and he was a single guy. But they did that, you know, it's this control thing, and so they made him do that. Now, he was all right. He came out okay with that, and we were good buddies, but it was interesting. I have a theory about that, as I've watched that over the years, is that the persecutors, those who are throwing the stones at people's sex lives, I think they're jealous. Or else they're guilty about something they're doing, don't want anybody else find out about it. But, you know, sexual misactivity is such good fodder for gossip. It's, you know, people like that. You know, they come up to you and say, do you know who she's sleeping with? Yeah, the entire Michigan State football team, you know, or something like that. And you'll, you know, people enjoy talking about that. Jesus' message is here. Give them a break. Don't condemn others, and God won't condemn you. Now, in the case of adultery, like everything else, you must protect yourself, but give them a break. You know, it's like you forgive the person who breaks into your house, but you put new locks on the doors. You know, the one phrase that I've heard a lot lately that I really like is forgiveness granted, access denied. And that's kind of what you have to do if you are a victim of adultery. I believe adultery, like everything else in this life, is a test. It's God checking us out, preparing us for the next life. So if you're tempted to cheat, it's a test of your character. You can grow from it. If you've been cheated on, it's a test of your character. Now, it's not just a test, but that's part of it. If you want to save a marriage and there's been adultery, you got to figure out how to live with it. If you don't want to save it, then get out. I'm going to talk about divorce next week. Either way, Jesus says for us to give adulterers a break. Now, what I want from this church, from you folks, is I want us personally to be free of shame when it comes to this sort of thing. Understand that attraction is not lust. Understand that adultery is not the end of the world. Humans cheat. That means that 1 out of 4 of you in here has cheated. If you're like the national statistics, I think it's probably a little higher than that. But it's a fact. Humans cheat. The nice thing about it is that humans can forgive. And that's a good thing. I want this church to be a dispenser of grace And that means that we all as individuals have to be dispensers of grace. Rule breakers are welcome here. And I want rule breakers to be welcome in your life too. Treat the rule breakers like you treat anyone else. Adulterers are welcome here, just like liars are. I said that many times at inappropriate places, that particularly when they're arguing about whether or not we should allow gay people to hold office in the Reformed Church. And I say, you know what? Let's throw all the liars out and keep the gay people. And I got blank stares. But I say, you know, if we throw all the liars out, we're going to have to throw everybody out, including me. And the deal was, well, you know, that kind of sexuality is premeditated. And I said, give me a break. You're already planning on how you're going to lie to your wife when you get home. You know, let's just, you know, it's the same thing. You're going to lie tomorrow again because you're human. So let the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ flow through you. I want it to be widely known that Laketon Bethel accepts adulterers just like we accept all sinners. So let's do that. Let's pray together. Lord, maybe there's some folks here who've been through adultery, who want to turn their lives around. There's other folks here who've been hurt by adultery. We ask for your healing for them. And for each one of us, my prayer is that we can be dispensers of grace to folks who've been affected by adultery and, of course, everything else. So help us to be dispensers of grace in this world that so badly needs it. Amen. All right, next week, I'm going to talk about divorce and when to do that and give you Jesus' teaching on divorce. And I think that's all my announcements to our video audience. As always, thanks for listening.